fire. First, he smokes a cigarette, and then um, um, right before that, though, he pours, gasoline on it. And we don't really see anything other than that. Just those few moments where he's pouring gasoline into a car, he takes out a cigarette, smokes a cigarette, um, gets him a really, really good puff, and then he chunks the cigarette into the car and it blows up. And then somewhere in the frame, there's a car that comes, which opens up the frame to see that this is some sort of big field or something like that, and maybe a dump or something, or a construction site, and then that car drives away or something like that. So this is it to me. It almost, now that I know the narrative, it begins in Setback. You don't know what it is because you might not have seen the movie, but when we get to the part where it is fully revealed why he is out here like this at night, setting a car on fire, you'll realize that this is part of the setback. So the movie after that goes into opening credits, and then we have Brian walking towards his office, and we see the door. The door reads Director of Sales, Brian Parker. So this is a nice office. This is a very clean office, right? He has his coffee. He's standing. He's in a suit. And the suit is lightly colored, but you'll see throughout the movie that his whole clothing choice changes. So this is very light here. We even have a lighted lamp here with flowers. Very peaceful, right? He feels comfortable in his element. He doesn't even have to sit back in the chair. He can just stand there, almost like a Roman soldier, somebody, and feel the room. And he gets a conference call about a meeting, and he doesn't know that the meeting is about him being laid off. And this is the pic of him being laid off. And I chose this frame because now it creates his setback, right? And he looks small against those two big buildings. Whereas the previous frame, he looks bigger, he looks stronger, he looks taller. He's tall against the desk, against the whole office, really. But here he's holding a box, he's holding his briefcase, he's walking out, he's laid off, and it is a different type of Brian that has now entered a setback. And it was no setback of his own because it was just layoffs, job cuts. But it's hard to reconcile the choices he makes after this, even if he feels pressed. Is still, when you get to understand why he made those choices, you can understand here that, okay, he lost his job, but there's another reason that I'm going to go over throughout the analysis. So this is him looking back, and you're going to see this throughout the film as well, throughout this film analysis, this looking backwards. And it has some credence, it has some sort of significance, because he looks back when he's in the car that we're about to see now, back into his childhood. And setback is one of those, the purpose of setback that I often explore in my book is to go back and look at those areas where you have struggled and failed. Look at areas. It's not for you to cry and say, woe is me. It's for you to look at areas of weakness and fix them before going on to greater battles. And he doesn't allow for him an opportunity to look at his areas of weakness. He jump starts into hasty decision making after hasty decision making until it leads to deadly consequences. He's in his car. The director uses this camera angle a lot. Justin Donnelly, he both wrote and directed the film. And so I noticed that there's always a person in a car, a character in a car, in some sort of contemplation. This could be seen as a reflection, or it could just be seen as thinking about the current moment, right? And so he's in a car and looking out and thinking about what just transpired. And this particular contemplation in the car, where he closes his eyes, he looks in the mirror, in the rear view mirror, closes his eyes, and it cuts to his childhood, where his father is holding a bankruptcy court document. His mother is at the front, driving the car, and he, as a young child, young teenager, I guess, is off to the left of his father. And so you will see the character Brian Parker reflect on this. You will see flashbacks of this, and it's more or less a way to sort of have him tap into his psychological aspect of what is going on. Also emotionally, he doesn't really cry at the beginning and throughout, but he does cry in the end. So here is him as a young boy, and it's sort of like some kind of deadness before he's even entered the world. He feels something. Maybe he feels the attitude of his father or the attitude of his mother, their personality. There's always some sort of threat, psychological threat. In this case, it's an economic threat, because if you are entering bankruptcy, it immediately pushes you down the economic ladder, right? And a bankruptcy can stay on your record, your credit report, for 10 years, I think. And so when he is contemplating being laid off, he's also contemplating his background and the financial issues in his background. And you'll hear him say throughout the movie, "I don't want this to happen to my family." And so I believe that belief, or that desire to make sure his family is set, continues to push him so that he doesn't look like the family that he came from. But the problem with his setback here, when he sets himself back in a flashback, you see that there's still no learning. He'll say in the movie later that he ran away, right, when he was younger, to try to make it. And you'll see the parallel to one of the teenagers who wants to run away as well. And they both sort of collide in the end. So the setback in this case is him reflecting, but it doesn't really do him any good if he's not going to implement the decisions in a more productive way. This is a frame of his family, present day. So his wife, the son here is happy, and the son that he was to his father is he's hoping that his son doesn't have to grow up in the same way. He lives in a very high-end lifestyle, very nice house, wealthy, right? He made good money as a director of sales, and it is important that he continues to put that smile on his wife's face. That's why when he leaves the job, he doesn't go into the house, because if he goes into the house, he knows that it's going to create a problem. It's going to, she'll be able to read him. So this happy picture here, he wants to maintain. And so he will do whatever he has to do to maintain it. So they end up having a call right before this frame here, and they are discussing why he can't go on to the trip with them, because he has something to do with the job. What's most important, I think, is interesting, is that he doesn't tell her about his setback. He doesn't tell her about losing the job. And the thing about setback is, often we don't always tell people that we have entered a setback. Sometimes we don't even recognize that we're actually in a setback. We think most times that, okay, this has happened to me, I'm going to get back on my feet, so all I have to basically do is just go get another job. And you see that throughout the movie. He's making calls because after all, he was a director of sales, so he should be able to go get another job. But that's not the case. And he's telling her about the fact that he won't be able to go on a trip with them or meet them on a trip. She's telling him, don't forget the $25,000 donation to the Cancer Society, American Cancer Society. And then other things transpire between them, and then she hangs up. They both hang up, but she sort of hangs up, which startles him. And this idea about the cancer donation check for $25,000, that pushes him on. Not the fact that he really has lost his job and he needs to get another job. He does that for a moment, trying to find another job. And I guess a moment in film time could be much, much longer, but that isn't really his focus. It's what she told him about the $25,000 check. That's a way of maintaining appearance. He's in setback. He's not telling his wife that he's in setback, that they cannot pay that $25,000 check because they need to make sure that they can cover themselves, shelter costs, other types of costs, just maintenance costs, family costs. That takes precedence over a $25,000 donation check. But when you are in setback, you do not think about the most important things because you don't think your setback is going to last long. You always think that it's going to turn around immediately. I know when I was in setback between 2006 to 2013, I thought it was just one of those things where, okay, I lost my job. So, I have a teaching degree, so essentially I'd be able to go and find another job. That was not the case, and I was out of work for a very long time. I didn't return to work until 2013, and it happened during the recession when jobs were sort of not shut down, but closed, or the gate was closed for a moment because of the financial crisis. And so as soon as you get a setback, you need to recognize that it is actually a setback, and that if it wasn't a setback, you wouldn't have sort of like the pain or the pain of dealing with that immediate issue. So she's in the car, she doesn't quite understand, but she tilts her head, and the director is giving you this sort of camera angle, looking at her in the car. She may be contemplating, but she doesn't have enough information to contemplate if there is something wrong. It's Brian Parker who is holding the knowledge. He's holding all of the information. He can make things a lot better. It's funny, if he had just come home, got out of the car, walked into the house and said, I lost my job, he would never have gotten into all of the other things that followed. That's very important to know, that you just confess the thing that you have lost. And then there's a different way that you could achieve recovery and restoring and overcoming, and then later advancing yourself. So that's an angle that I want you to think about. So the narrative shifts to these two teens. The one in the car, in the truck, is Jesse McAllister, and the boy standing with the glasses is Sammy. And I don't remember if there was a last name for Sammy. But he had we don't know what it is that he has done, but I'm gonna tell you that he jacked that truck. And that's something that Jesse always does, and something that Sammy has a problem with. And so it looks like he's running things. He looks powerful. And it's almost like he likes the setback. Stealing a car, stealing anything for something that you have not worked for is a setback. You create an immediate setback because you haven't earned the thing that you're driving. And so that image right here of this young boy doing something before his time, he won't go get a job as a teenager to maybe go get a car, for himself or whatever. He would rather jack a car and call that progress. And you see this oftentimes with people who are in setback when they're trying to get out of their setback immediately, because you're going to see what kind of background Jesse comes from, and you're going to see why he's motivated to leave, or to jack cars for money, or just jack cars for ego. When you feel powerless in a setback situation, you automatically do something, anything to try to wake yourself up, pull yourself out of the setback. But setback requires correction, and you're going to have to go through the process of correction, which might be a lot longer than the punishment or the pain you feel. And he doesn't experience punishment or pain from stealing cars throughout the movie. It isn't until all the worlds collide that punishment and pain sort of becomes prevalent as well as expected. So again, the teenager in the truck is Jesse McAllister, and the boy with the glasses standing outside of the truck is Sammy. So Brian Parker has finally drove up to his house. The wife had already pulled off with their child to go on a trip that he can't go on. And so he's sitting in the garage. He lights a cigarette. He opens the window. He drops a cigarette. And the flames that you see here, even though they are not necessarily flames, they are a little bit reminiscent of the flames that open up the movie. That he's sitting in a car with smoke. And why is that significant? I'm not quite sure. But it's, all kinds of thoughts go through your mind when you are in a setback, or at the beginning of your setback. You just honestly don't know how you're going to work this thing out. Even if you just ended your setback from like an hour ago, something is not quite right, and something is not going to be as easy as you think it is. But until you walk it out, you really don't know. So he's in this car that's filled with smoke, whereas at the beginning of the movie, he was setting fire to a car and you saw smoke. So the thing about Setback is interesting. Like, his career can be summed up into this one box. It's funny how you work for, you go to school, you work hard, you spend time on these jobs, 10, 15, 20 years. And at the drop of a hat, at the snap of a finger, you could lose your job. And whatever, he couldn't take the furniture from the job, from his office. Only thing that he could take is the suit that he's wearing, the suitcase that he's holding, and the box. And that your career can be summed up into that one box. It's an interesting visual, and it's set against a house that is clearly high end, right? It is clearly wealthy. It is clearly more than the box that he's carrying. But now you got to reconcile your career, your existence, your setback, and work again from that box. And sometimes you may have to empty that box altogether and create a new box. I don't know. But there is a little bit of time where he's taking things out of the box. And I think he goes into one of his little planners or something like that, and he starts to make calls. But you will see in the movie that he doesn't stick with it. Had he stayed with it and continued to go on interviews, and we don't know how many interviews, we just know about the one that he meets with somebody, and we're about to get into that. So he's making calls just like all of us when we have lost our previous job and we're trying to find a new job. And the interesting thing is he's looking at a newspaper, an advertising paper, but not necessarily calling a headhunter. And I would think that a person who was a was in middle management would go through a different type of tool, organization, headhunters or something like that. And so this tells you a lot about his mindset, because he's looking for work through a newspaper when he just came off of a job where he was likely making hundreds of $1,000s a year. And so where is the sort of process of him talking to a person from a firm, especially coming from that level? So, it's interesting how we begin to negotiate our setback and forget, where we are. I understand that when you are in setback, you may have to take a job to take a job. But I also think to myself, there's something a little odd too about him looking through a newspaper to find a job, especially with his background. So he's meeting with someone, looks like a job interview, very, kind of classy, not necessarily elegant, but, classy, right? And, at that level, I think they take dinners, they take lunch or something like that, middle management. But he's not going into an office to interview. And I wonder if this is sort of like the first sign that he was not going to be taken seriously or something, because if he has all of that experience and he's good at sales, why isn't he being more received in a more professional way? You take lunch or you take dinners once you have already been on the job and you're setting up a meeting with clients. Even a client, you would have them come into the office, right? So he's experiencing another setback because this interview or this semi-interview is not going to net him a gain. And he's happy for the guy, but he's not going to get the position or be considered for any other position. So here's a setback as well.